So with that, I'd like to bring up Paul, who is Paul Terranova, the Executive Director of the Lucia Community Education Center. And we all know that Paul is more than that. He is a pillar in this community. So by round of applause, who has been positively impacted by Paul coming into your life? And he's moving up here, so I won't say more because, no. I won't be invited back, but Paul is someone who has been there for me throughout my life and been there for everyone in this community. He's been there for my mom throughout her life. He is that safe person. He's in everyone's top 5 when you're in trouble, and he's in everyone's top 5 when you have some good news to share. Paul is amazing. My mom was one of the original tenant founders of the Wexford Ridge Community Center before it became the Lucia Center. And she said right away when they were first doing interviews to get an executive director that Paul was the guy. And she said, and she'll say it to this day, she will say that he had the brains and he had the heart. So let's give it up one more time for Paul's heart as he comes up here.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah, thank you. So I'm Paul. We're here celebrating 10 years in this building, which is kind of amazing. I was just thinking about that recently and remembering walking around the muddy construction site with Jack Lucia in these like silly, ill-fitting hard hats. And bringing my kids over, who were 6 and 8 at the time. We just sent the older one off to college, and showing them the new building. I was realizing that pretty much all of the high schoolers, even the ones who've been here for forever, don't remember coming to after-school program in those 2 apartments with the wall knocked out in between. That we've really been here that long. And so I wanted to say thank you. There are a lot of people in this room who were a part of making this possible. I want to say thank you for those of you who helped to build this center, both physically and as a community of people who take care of each other. That's important in a time like we're living in right now. You turn on the news and you see so many ways in which people are turning on each other or turning away from each other or kind of tearing each other apart. And I feel like most days, the question that seems to be going through my mind is, what are we called to do? For some reason, that's the language that speaks to me. And there are lots of things. I know there are a lot of you here who are involved in voter registration and voter education here at the center and elsewhere, and that voting in elections, absolutely, incredibly important. And then I also think about those individual interactions. A conversation I had recently where someone said, in this community, what do we do when we see someone sleeping in a car in our neighborhood who doesn't look like us, or in the shopping center parking lot? Do we call the police or do we bring them breakfast? Are we pushing ourselves in those directions to really think about what is that basic human decent thing that we should be doing no matter what? We have 45 new neighbor families just down the end of Tree Lane. Resilient people who have survived some of the worst that our society can throw at folks. And I have to say that while there have been a few people in our neighborhood who have responded more with fear and suspicion, I've been really impressed and proud of the number of people who are just searching for new and different ways to say welcome and we're here for you. And I also want to give a little bit of credit to our staff who over these last couple of years have been very, very stretched. And when that place opened and they heard there were 45 new families, the first question was, what can we do? What can we open up? What more can we do? How can we do things differently? It feels really good to be a part of a team like that. So you have the voting and you have the individual help. And those of you who know me know that I'm a community organizer at heart. And so I've been thinking a lot and talking a lot about organizing and what is our organizing response to what's going on in our community. We've been working a lot recently to make sure our Neighborhood Organizing Institute, which is our training program for neighborhood organizers across the city that we run with Goodman Center, it continues next year. And I think there were some alders who are with us or were with us who are helping to make that happen. So if you get a chance to talk to your alder, say, support the Neighborhood Organizing Institute. You know, but as we were doing that, we were talking about how do you actually document the effectiveness of this kind of work. You know, people understand service, people understand helping people, and people understand voting, right? That's very clear. But how do you talk about this building of community? How do you talk about building leadership and what that tangibly does? And there's a great study that I've been touting for years by a couple of researchers named Sampson and Earls. And they did it down in Chicago. They spent, I think they did about 4,000 interviews in 400 different neighborhoods. Their poor graduate students had to drive SUVs through these 400 neighborhoods. They got 11,000 hours of footage that they got to then, you know, document and write up. And they took that and they cross-referenced it with all the crime data from those 400 neighborhoods. And they were testing some things that you might have heard of, like the broken windows policing and all these different kinds of theories about what predicted crime. And they found that they basically debunked almost all of them. But the one thing they found made a difference was this thing that they called collective efficacy. You know, kind of that sociology speak. Anyone sociologists here, right? But then they started saying, what does this mean? Collective efficacy, and they said really it's about the hope in a neighborhood. It's about that feeling that people have when people are willing to look out for each other and look out for each other's kids. They put a picture on the front of their report that kind of summed it up. It was a picture of a vacant lot that had been turned into a community garden, and it had a little hand-painted sign that said, "Please respect our efforts." Now there are folks who are doing studies. I was just looking at it as we were doing this little campaign that we're doing with the city. They're doing studies and they're connecting collective efficacy to things like, you know, broad health indicators, obesity, depression. That, you know, this idea that when we come together, it's sort of not rocket science. Like, human beings are meant to take care of each other. That's how we evolved. That's the way we're supposed to be. And we've definitely been talking about that for years here at the center. Those of you who were involved with us when we were building the center, you heard us say again and again that when people live next to each other, that just makes us residents. It's not until we start taking care of each other that we become community members. And then when we're willing to stand up for each other in our public lives, that's when we become citizens. And we think of this place as a vehicle for people to move from residents to community members to citizens. And so that's our invitation to you. You know, with all the news that we see when we turn on the TV or turn on the radio, it's hard for me to stand in front of you and say, yes, the Lusher Community Education Center is the answer to all of your ills, right? That might be a little bit of an oversell, but I do think that the research says that the kind of work that we're doing here and that so many others are doing in other places, it's a part of the answer. And I can definitely say that the Sophies and the Brias and the Denises of the world give me hope. They're the ones that kind of keep me going. I can also promise you that we are in this for the long haul. When Sophie and when this building was built, Sophie and Bria were 7 years old, right? There are 7 and 8-year-olds who come here after school every day, 5 and 10-year-olds who come here after school every day, who are amazing young people who can change this world. If we believe in them, if we stick with them, and if we do everything that we can to pave the way and to make this world what they deserve to have with every ounce of power that we've got. So that when we do ask you for your support, I hope that you'll think of the little Brias and the little Sophies, and I hope you'll join us in committing to stick with them. Thank you for everything that you've done, and thank you in advance for everything you're going to do. Thanks.